Problem solving is a key skill, and it's one that can make a huge difference to your career. At work, problems are at the center of what many people do every day. You're either solving a problem for a client, supporting those who are solving problems, or discovering new problems to solve. The problems you face can be large or small, simple or complex, and easy or difficult to solve. Regardless of the nature of the problem, a fundamental part of every manager's role is finding ways to solve them. So being a confident problem solver is really important to your success. Much of that confidence comes from having a good process to use when approaching a problem. With one, you can solve problems quickly and effectively. Without one, your solutions may be ineffective or you'll get stuck and do nothing, with sometimes painful consequences. There are 4 basic steps in problem solving: defining the problem, generating alternatives, evaluating and selecting alternatives, and then implementing the solution. The key to a good problem definition is ensuring that you deal with the real problem, not its symptoms. For example, if performance in your department is substandard, you might think the problem is with the individual submitting work. However, if you look a bit deeper, the real problem might be a lack of training or an unreasonable workload. At this stage, it's also important to ensure that you look at the issue from a variety of perspectives. If you commit yourself too early, you can end up with a problem statement that's really a solution instead. For example, consider this problem statement. We have to find a way of disciplining of people who do substandard work. This doesn't allow you the opportunity of discovering the real reasons for underperformance. There are 6 stages of problem solving. The first stage is problem identification. This stage involves detecting and recognizing that there is a problem, identifying the nature of the problem, and defining the problem. The first phase of problem solving may sound obvious, but often requires more thought and analysis. Identifying a problem can be a difficult task in itself. Is there a problem at all? What is the nature of the problem? Are there in fact numerous problems? How can the problem be best defined? By spending some time defining the problem, you will not only understand it more clearly yourself, but be able to communicate its natures to others. This leads to the second stage, structuring the problem. This stage involves a period of observation, careful inspection, fact-finding, and developing a clear picture of the problem. Following on from problem identification, structuring the problem is all about gaining more information about the problem and increasing understanding. This phase is all about finding the analysis, building a more comprehensive picture of both the goals and the barriers. This stage may not be necessary for very simple problems, but is essential for problems of a more complex nature. The third stage is looking for possible solutions. During this stage, you will generate a range of possible courses of action, but with little attempt to evaluate them at this stage. From the information gathered in the first 2 phases of the problem-solving framework, it is now time to start thinking about possible solutions to the identified problem. In a group situation, this stage is often carried out as a brainstorming session, letting each person in the group express their views on possible solutions. In organizations, different people will have different expertise in different areas, and it is useful, therefore, to hear the views of each concerned party. The next stage is making a decision. This stage involves careful analysis of the different possible courses of action and then selecting the best solution for implementation. This is perhaps the more complex part of the problem-solving process. Following on from the previous step, it is now time to look at each potential solution and carefully analyze it. Some solutions may not be possible due to other problems, like time constraints or budget. It is important at this stage to also consider what might happen if nothing was done to solve the problem. Sometimes trying to solve a problem that leads to many more problems requires some very creative thinking and innovative ideas. The 5th stage is implementation. This stage involves accepting and carrying out the chosen course of action. Implementation means acting on the chosen solution. During implementation, more problems may arise, especially if identification or structuring of the original problem was not carried out fully. And the last stage is monitoring or seeking feedback. The last stage is about reviewing the outcomes of problem solving over a period of time, including seeking feedback as to the success of the outcomes of the chosen solution. The final stage of problem solving is concerned with checking that the process was successful. This can be achieved by monitoring and gaining feedback from people affected by any changes that occurred. It is good practice to keep a record of outcomes and any additional problems that occurred. People often find it hard to make decisions. Inevitably, we all have to make decisions all the time. Some are more important than others. Some people put off making decisions by endlessly searching for more information or getting other people to offer their recommendations. Others resort to decision-making by taking a vote, sticking a pin in a list, or tossing a coin. Regardless of the effort that is put into making a decision, it has to be accepted that some decisions will not be the best possible choice. So what exactly is decision-making? In its simplest sense, decision-making is the act of choosing between two or more courses of action. However, it must also be remembered that there may not always be a correct decision among the available choices. There may have been a better choice that had not been considered, or the right information may not have been available at the time. Because of this, it is important to keep a record of all important decisions and the reasons why these decisions were made, so that improvements can be made in the future. This also provides justification for any decision taken when something goes wrong. Hindsight might not be able to correct past mistakes, but will aid improved decision-making in the future. There are 7 stages of decision-making. The first stage is listing possible solutions or options. In order to come up with a list of all possible solutions and or options available, it is usually appropriate to work on a group problem-solving process. This process could include brainstorming or some other idea-generating process. This stage is important to the overall decision-making processes, as a decision will be made from a selection of fixed choices. Always remember to consider the possibility of not making a decision or doing nothing, and be aware that both options are actually potential solutions in themselves. The second stage of decision-making is setting a time scale and deciding who is responsible for the decision. In deciding how much time to make available for the decision-making process, it's helpful to consider the following. How much time is available to spend on this decision? Is there a deadline for making a decision, and what are the consequences of missing this deadline? Is there advantage in making a quick decision? How important is it to make a decision? How important is it that the decision is correct? Will spending more time improve the quality of the decision? Before making a decision, it needs to be clear who is going to take responsibility for the decision. Remember that it is not always those making the decision who have to assume responsibility for it. Is it an individual, a group, or an organization? This is a key question because the degree to which responsibility for a decision is shared can greatly influence how much risk people are willing to take. If the decision-making is for work, then it is helpful to consider the structure of the organization that you are in. Is the individual responsible for the decisions he or she makes, or does the organization hold ultimate responsibility? Who has to carry out the course of action decided? Who will it affect if something goes wrong? Are you willing to take responsibility for a mistake? Finally, you need to know who can actually make the decision. When helping a friend, colleague, or client to reach a decision, in most circumstances, the final decision and responsibility will be taken by them. Whenever possible, and if it's not obvious, it is better to make a formal decision as to who is responsible for a decision. This idea of responsibility also highlights the need to keep a record of how any decision was made, what information it was based on, and who was involved. Enough information needs to be kept to justify the decision in the future, so that if something goes wrong, it is possible to show that your decision was reasonable in the circumstance and given knowledge you held at that time. The third stage of decision-making is information gathering. Before starting in the process of making a decision, all relevant information needs to be gathered. If there is inadequate or outdated information, then it is more likely that a wrong decision might be made. Also, if there is a lot of irrelevant information, then the decision will be difficult to make. It will be easier to become distracted by unnecessary factors. There is need for up-to-date, accurate information on which to make decisions. Such information needs to be gathered so that a well-informed decision can be made. The amount of time spent on information gathering has to be weighed against how much you are willing to risk making the wrong decision. In a group situation, such as at work, it may be appropriate for different people to research different aspects of the information required. The fourth stage is weighing up the risks involved. One key question is how much risk should be taken in making the decision. Generally, the amount of risk an individual is willing to take depends on the following: the seriousness of the consequences of taking the wrong decision, the benefits of making the right decision, not only how bad the worst outcome might be, but also how likely that outcome is to happen. It is also useful to consider what the risk of the worst possible outcome occurring might be, and to decide if the risk is acceptable. The choice can be between going all out for success or making a safe decision. The fifth stage of decision making is deciding on values. Everybody has their own unique set of values, what they believe to be important. Many people decide to buy a car for themselves, but different people buy different cars based on their own personal values. One person might feel that price is the most important feature, whereas another person might be more concerned with its speed and performance. Others might value safety, luggage space, or the car's impact on the environment, or a combination of these features. Depending on which values are considered important, different opinions may seem more or less attractive. If the responsibility for a decision is shared, it is possible that one person might not have the same values as the other. In such cases, it is important to obtain a consensus as to which values are to be given the most weight. It is important that the values on which a decision is made are understood because they will have a strong influence on the final choice. People do not make decisions based on just one of their values. They will consider all their values which are relevant to the decision and prioritize them in order of importance. The sixth stage of decision making is weighing up the pros and cons. It is possible to evaluate the pros and cons of each possible solution or option by considering the possible advantages and disadvantages. One aid to evaluating any solution or option is to use a balance sheet, weighing up the pros and cons associated with that solution. For example, a small business that regularly hires vehicles from an external company might consider buying a vehicle for their exclusive use. And the last stage of decision making is actually making the decision. There are many techniques that can be used to help in reaching a decision. The pros and cons method that we just talked about is just one way of evaluating each of the possible solutions or options available. There are other techniques which allow for more direct comparisons between possible solutions. These are more complicated and generally involve a certain amount of calculation. These can be particularly helpful when it is necessary to weigh up a number of conflicting values and options. Now it's your turn to see how good you are at problem solving. The following link will take you to a quiz that will help you determine where your level is currently at and help you to figure out solutions for growth in this area.